Just weeks before Bulgaria is set to join the euro, the country has plunged into political turmoil after a controversial budget, criticised for prioritising lawmakers' salaries over the needs of ordinary Bulgarians and introducing unnecessary tax increases, sparked widespread public anger. The government initially vowed to withdraw the bill after mounting backlash, but the unrest only grew, triggering the largest anti-corruption process in more than a decade and putting more pressure on the government. So in this video, we're going to take a look at these anti-corruption protests and whether they could bring down yet another Bulgarian government. Who is the most influential person in the world? Each year, we ask our audience to rank their 10 most influential people across politics, media, culture, and activism. And now it's time for you to have your say. Click the link in the description to cast your vote for the 2026 ranking. First, let's start with some context. Since 2009, the largest party in parliament has been the centre-right Citizens for European Development of Bulgaria, or GERB party. GERB is led by Boyko Borisov, the former mayor of Sofia and personal guard of Todor Zhivkov, who effectively ran Bulgaria from 1954 until 1989. Despite originally running on an anti-corruption platform, Borisov has proved to be quite corrupt himself, but hung on to power for the following decade or so due to a lack of viable opposition. Alongside Borisov, there emerged another key political player, Delian Pivsky, a mafia bigwig, media mogul, and sanctioned oligarch who has significant control over the security services, with deep links to both Borisov and the GERB party. Described by Reporters Without Borders as the most notorious embodiment of the corruption and collusion between media, politicians, and oligarchs in Bulgaria, in 2009, Pivsky became a lawmaker for the Movement for Rights and Freedoms Party, a parliamentary group that supposedly represents Muslim and ethnic minority interests. And in 2013, he was appointed as the head of Bulgaria's counterintelligence agency, which sparked mass protests and lasted for around a year until he stepped down. Following a series of corruption scandals, in 2020 the country was engulfed by a massive wave of anti-mafia protests, demanding Borisov's resignation. Protesters also called for the resignation of the country's chief prosecutor, seen by many Bulgarians as a leading defender of the mafia, and the prosecution of Pivsky, who was sanctioned in 2021 by the US under the Magnitsky Act, with the UK following suit 2 years later. Anyway, after these mass protests, elections in April 2021 ousted Borisov and his party, who were replaced by a coalition of anti-corruption reformist parties. However, grappling with skyrocketing gas prices triggered by the war in Ukraine and a wider cost of living crisis, the anti-corruption parties failed to form a united government. In this context, at the next elections in October 2022, Borisov and his GERB party emerged as the largest party once again, but failed to form a government because no party wanted to govern alongside them. This led to another election in April 2023, but this time around, the two sides were able to work out an agreement and formed a rotational government. Not everyone was happy with this arrangement though, and many reformist voters were annoyed that the anti-corruption parties had decided to work with Borisov, who had been their political nemesis not too long ago. Either way, the coalition didn't last long, and 9 months in, the government collapsed, with the reformists blaming Pivsky for derailing talks, who at this point had become the leader of the DPS. Then, in January 2025, after 2 more elections, Borisov's GERB party were finally able to scrape together a coalition, with the former communist and pro-Russian Bulgarian Socialist Party, the populist There Is Such a People Party, and a faction of Pivsky's party, ending a prolonged stretch of political instability, and 7 elections in 4 years. Borisov's return originally gave way to a sense of disillusionment among Bulgaria's reformist bloc, who had spent the last few years battling out in the ballot box to no avail. Bulgaria ranked second to last in the EU on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index in 2024, just 1 place above Hungary. The situation regarding press freedom isn't that much better. Together with Greece and Cyprus, Bulgaria is right at the bottom of the Reporters Without Borders press freedom ranking for 2025 for EU countries. Meanwhile, the country is struggling with one of the worst cost of living crises in Europe, and low real wages, combined with a pervasive sense that Bulgaria's governance problems are essentially unsolvable, has pushed thousands of young people to leave the country en masse. Despite this, young people have also been largely absent from political demonstrations. The last major youth-driven protests were the student occupations of Sofia University in 2013 and 2014. However, late last month this changed, when the government introduced a controversial draft budget for 2026, which raised individual contributions to pension and social security programs. These increases, coupled with pay hikes for state employees such as law enforcement, triggered widespread protests, fueled by a wider dissatisfaction at the country's long-standing corruption problems. After the protests, the government announced that they would withdraw the budget, but a few days later they went back on this decision. This triggered even more unrest and more protests both in the capital, Sofia, as well as numerous towns and cities across the country, including Varna, Plovdiv and Bukaz. And according to a recent poll, these mass protests have the backing of more than 70% of Bulgarians, and about half of Bulgarians would approve of the government's resignation. Some political commentators have drawn parallels with the youth-led demonstrations in neighbouring Serbia, where after a fatal railway station accident last November, widely seen as a symptom of deep-rooted corruption, student-driven anti-government protests had continued for more than a year. Alongside the high cost of living and dissatisfaction with ruling elites, many Bulgarians have also raised concerns that the spending increases in the budget would lead to a sharp rise in public debt and stoke inflation even further, at a time when Bulgaria is preparing to adopt the euro in January. And people are also worried about that too, with only 39% of people supporting Bulgaria joining the single currency, and just 1/5 backing the planned 2026 target date of January 2026. This hesitation is largely driven due to a lack of trust in Bulgaria's institutions to ensure a smooth or fair transition. Even though most Eurozone countries are able to adopt the euro without much macroeconomic disruption, many Bulgarians worry that the switch will trigger a kind of one-off rise in prices, as businesses take advantage of the switch to increase prices by essentially rounding up to the closest euro. Anyway, in response to the mass outcry, the government did eventually withdraw the budget. However, this political crisis is far from over. Last Friday, Bulgaria's opposition parties escalated the crisis further by filing a no-confidence vote against the government. Meanwhile, Bulgaria's president, an independent, has also criticised the government, accusing the ruling bloc of entrenching lawlessness and division, and has called for early elections to be held, arguing that it's the only way forward, and insisting that Bulgaria needs real change. Whether another round of elections can actually deliver that change, however, is yet to be seen. Now, that's quite a lot of information we've thrown your way, and that's after we've simplified it down for you. So you can only imagine how overwhelming it is to sift through hundreds of outlets reporting on this story online to just find out what happened. Luckily for us, there's a website and app that collects all of these articles and puts them into one easy-to-access place, and that website is, you guessed it, Ground News. Not only does Ground News assemble all of these articles, but it also offers a breakdown into bias distribution, factuality, and ownership of each individual source, giving you the opportunity to dive deep into the information that may have been hidden from you previously. For example, if we take this story on Bulgaria's protests, we can see that there are 62 sources currently reporting on it, with most of that coverage coming from the left. If we use their handy bias comparison feature, we can see that the left frames the protests as a popular uprising, linking them to Euro adoption issues, while right-leaning outlets portray the tax hikes as punishing, and even draw comparisons to Germany's debt. We can also filter and sort every story by their factuality level, helping you to easily grasp the reliability of each outlet, or take an even more extensive look at who owns each of these outlets, keeping you fully informed on who is trying to feed you information online. Even if you want to stay close to home and explore what's been said in your area, Ground News can break down all of your local news too, and even shows you stories you might have missed in their blind spot feature. Here you can see everything that's being disproportionately reported on one side or the other, whether it's a mile from your house or on the other side of the world. That's just scratching the surface of what Ground News has to offer. So if you're interested, there's no better time to sign up, as we're partnering with them to offer 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. And just in time for the holiday season, you can even gift a subscription to a friend or family member with the same 40% discount. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description, or go to ground.news/TLDR, or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.